think mothers and fathers made up the gods because they wanted their children to sleep through the night.
I saw a vision in the flames. Great battle in the snow. I saw it. And you saw whatever she gave birth to. I never believed, but when you see the truth, when it's right there in front of you, as real as these iron bars, how can you deny her God is real?
Hey guys, Kevin here, and today I want to answer the question, which gods are real in the Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones universe? This will actually be a two-part video because the topic of the gods is so intertwined with the topic of magic. So part 1 will focus more on the religions in this universe, and part 2 will focus more on the sources of magic. So let's begin. Back in January, there was a poll of various fan theories on Westeros.org, a Song of Ice and Fire University on Tumblr, and a Song of Ice and Fire subreddit on Reddit. One of the questions polled was, which gods are real? The results were interesting, but not surprising. Between 32% and 46% of fans polled said the old gods and R'hllor, the Lord of Light, are real. The Drowned God and the Many-Faced God, the god of the Faceless Men, were also favored with double-digit percentages. Less than 30% of fans polled said they were agnostic on the question of the gods, which means they didn't care or didn't think it really mattered whether or not the gods are real. But less than a fifth of the fans polled actually got this question right, which is, none of the gods in the Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones are actually real. Now, if you disagree, please watch the whole video before disliking or leaving mean comments or whatever you're going to do. For those of you unfamiliar with this line of thinking, the idea is that magic exists in this world, and people in this world use religion to justify the existence of magic. I began this video with a scene from the show where Stannis pretty much tells Davos that he doesn't want to believe, but he has seen Melisandre's magic. He's seen the Red Priestess's power, so how can it be said that her God is not giving her those powers and those visions? This seems to be the line of thinking of many viewers and half the book readers. But take into consideration why Stannis thinks this in this scene. Melisandre's magic is the only magic he's seen in this whole series. He hasn't seen the things Bran and Jojen are doing. He hasn't seen the Faceless Men. He hasn't seen what happens on the Iron Islands where the Greyjoys actually drown people and resurrect them in their baptism ceremony. He hasn't seen Dany and her dragons. He hasn't seen and doesn't know about any of this. These are all people who worship different gods and are still granted magical powers. If magic is coming from divine sources, then all these gods have to be real. And that's inconsistent with Melisandre's religion, which says that only the Lord of Light and the Great Other are real. The idea that magic is related to the gods is only perpetuated in this series by Melisandre, Thoros of Myr, Moqorro, and other Red Priests. If you read the last 2 Game of Thrones books, A Feast for Crows and A Dance of Dragons, then you know that generally speaking, if Melisandre or Cersei says something is true, then you should probably believe the exact opposite. As for the old gods, everything that has been said to have been done by the old gods can be explained as actions taken by Bloodraven or the Children of the Forest. Bloodraven is the three-eyed crow. He's the wizard that Bran meets at the end of Season 4. And everything from the Stark children getting their direwolves, to talking crows, to talking ravens, to the trees having faces on them can be explained by Bloodraven and the Children of the Forest without there needing to be any kind of higher power. That is, of course, if you accept that magic exists in this world in and of itself. And why am I so confident that it does? Well, George R. R. Martin has been asked questions about the gods in his story many times before, because it's an interesting question that does need clarity. And as such, there are interviews where he addresses such questions that you can find online. I have the audio from 2 interviews that George R. R. Martin gave when he answered these kinds of questions. The first one he did alongside Michelle Fairley, the actress who plays Lady Catelyn Stark. The question he was asked was, why haven't we heard from the Seven and their magical abilities like we've seen the old gods and the Lord of Light? And this was his answer.
I'm not sure what you mean by heard from, a postcard, a telegram. Email.
I don't intend, none of these gods have been on stage. I mean, people believe in them, just as people believe in the seven. I don't intend to ever actually bring a god on stage and have him interacting with people. I'm not sure any of the gods in Westeros are real. I'm not sure that any of the gods in real world are real. I'm a doubter in that sense, which is not to undermine, not to say that the people who believe in them don't believe in them. I mean, in the books, I think the seven can be seen most strongly in some of the Davos chapters. I recall this section where Davos lives through the Battle of Blackwater and is found clutching this rock and is saved. He really does feel that the mother, he had a vision of the mother and she appeared to him, and he feels that the seven are instructing him to kill Melisandre. So his faith in the seven is driving some of his beliefs. And Caitlin in the book also has a certain religious faith in the seven.
She prays to the seven, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But other than that, it works on a more, I don't know, thematic and symbolic function than a literal one.
As the author said, the gods in this universe serve a more symbolic and thematic function than a literal one. Which then begs the question, why include all this at all? Why confuse the issue? And the answer is that it adds to the depth and the realism and the complexity of this series. There's a history there. When the Targaryens first came over to Westeros, they worshipped their crazy foreign dragon gods, and that upset the Sept and the faith of the Seven and caused the earliest conflicts after the Targaryen conquest. That led to wars that didn't end until the Targaryens took the Seven as their own gods. In the trailer, you see the new High Septon standing against the crown on religious grounds and saying that the gods demand justice. He's probably heard all these rumors about incest and extramarital sex and murder, and he's not having any of that. And you see the importance of religion to the cultures of the North where they worship the old gods, and the Iron Islands where they worship the drowned gods, or the drowned god, and even the Dothraki Sea where they worship the horse god. George R. R. Martin also talks about the importance of religion in real-world history and in his fictional world in an interview he did for the book A World of Ice and Fire.
But I do always try to consider the question of religion, which I think is important because religion shapes societies and shapes cultures and shapes values. And even in our modern world, of course, we see conflicts all around the world being driven by religious disputes, even now. And of course, through history, the religious disputes are legion, and the millions of people who have died in the names of that are, it's appalling to think about. But you can't ignore religion in fantasy, I think, because it's too important in history.
We arguably live in a world devoid of miracles, but there are thousands of religions out there that talk about the miracles and the various acts of gods that have happened throughout human history. And in a world where magic is real, where you can physically see what is an effective miracle anywhere by these practitioners of magic, you're going to believe in miracles, you're going to believe in the gods they say are responsible for those miracles. And George R. R. Martin also talks about this in his World of Ice and Fire interview.
And the other thing that, of course, is worth mentioning about religion is, in fantasy, is that in most fantasies, you have working magic. You have magic that demonstrably works, which would affect the religious feelings of many people, Even when I was a Catholic and going to catechism and I was being taught all these Catholic things, I would sort of say, Sister, why is it that all this walking on water and raising the dead and stuff took place like 2,000 years ago? Because if it took place now, I would be much more convinced if I could see it on television, And indeed, if I would become the most religious guy in the world if we could actually see someone raising the dead, or ascending to heaven, or doing any of these things we read about in the Bible and other ancient religious texts. And in fantasy, that does happen here, where we are seeing in the red god, for example, in my own books, people say, well, why are the Brotherhood Without Banners abandoning their own religion that they were raised with, the Seven, to follow Thoros of Myr and the red gods? Well, it's partly because they've seen him raise the dead. Not once, but several times. Yeah. That's persuasive. Yeah. So they're thinking, well, maybe this guy has the right of it here.
So in the rich universe that George R. R. Martin has created, religion is used to justify the existence of magic, as well as a source of conflict and motivation for the numerous characters he's created. This adds to the realism and complexity of the story he's telling. But I think a big part of the reason magic continues to be associated with the gods in the series isn't because characters like Melisandre say they're connected, but because very specific types of magic are associated with very specific religions, such as working with the old gods and seeing visions in the flames with the Lord of Light. The magic associated with the old gods is not the same as the magic that's associated with the red god, not the same as the magic associated with the drowned god, or the same kind of magic associated with the many-faced god. But if you look more closely at the series, you'll see another pattern emerge that explains why these magics are different. I'll go into my observations and what I think is actually happening with magic in the series in part 2. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and hopefully in the next year's poll of the various The Song of Ice and Fire theories, I'll see at least half of the respondents saying that the gods aren't real. Like, comment, subscribe, share. I'll be coming with part 2 as soon as I can.